Ahoy! New World have dropped a ton of information about the expansion all at once. I guess so much about next week, it's all coming today, but oh well. We're going to start with the trailer, we're going to look at that, we're going to talk about that a little bit, and then we're going to look at the changes that they've announced outside of the trailer itself. So it starts out here with an area that's likely the new first light. We see a wolf immediately, and we see a flail hitting a chameleon. And that's a beautiful animation right there, right away. I really hope we get an attack like that in-game. I don't know what this giant chameleon mob is, but I guess it's one of the new Angry Earth. Then we have the wolf exploring the forest a little bit more. We got these vines, again, typical of the Angry Earth. We can see that the Angry Earth are taking this place over. Again, first light. And then we see the Mammoth, and this is like an Angry Earth Mammoth. It has the typical Angry Earth wood patterns. Very, very cool. We see this opening here, where we'll in a second see Artemis, I think, what's she called again in game? Ayana or something. And first we see the Minotaur here as well. So these three will be referred to as lords in a second. That'll be explained a little bit later. And here we have the Queen of Mischief.
Mighty lords, let us cleanse these lands.
You can see this interesting trail here that follows, and that's everywhere in the forest here, this Angry Earth effect, which may be a new form of corruption. And then we have a new type of enemy here as well, like some kind of, well, almost hippogriff or something, a griffin at least. We've got the wolf as an ally here. Even though he is referred to as one of the lords, I'm not sure if that's... if he just happened to be there or if he's actually one of the lords. We'll find out about that, I guess. And then we got mount riding, of course. And here we can see all of the different mounts. I'm actually gonna pause here for a second. You can actually see there's more than just the wolf, as we found out from the data mining earlier already. We can see the lion here as well. And we can see the horse. We can see the flail prominently displayed here. This flail looks very, very different from the one in the trailer, by the way. And then we can see a new sword and a new bow as well, I guess. Funny enough, I think the helm on the right is the Golden Rage helm. We also have a launch date here with the 3rd of October. But of course, there are many, many more details. They explicitly mention riding mounts, wielding a new weapon, and exploring transformed lands right at the start of the article. And they also mention that this will be a paid expansion. Artemis' next chapter will be available for $30 US. I think this is a reasonable price, assuming that the content is sufficient and that there's something to do for people who don't want the expansion as well. We'll get into that a little bit later. New players can get the base game and the expansion in a bundle for $70 as the New World Elysian Edition bundle. I'm guessing this will probably come with some other stuff as well, considering otherwise it would literally just be the separate prices for both the game and the expansion, so you probably get some skins or something with that. I personally would have preferred a $60 version for new players. They give it a little bit more incentive, but then again, $70 for a game nowadays is also not really unheard of, especially with an expansion. They also mention here is the revamped mainline story quest, open world PvP changes based on player feedback and quality of life improvements, like the removal of ward banes and expertise. We didn't know that one yet. So a lot of things, a lot of core systems that are being touched here. So the new area, First Light, is now called Elysian Wilds, and they mention here directly the primordial beast lords that will be awaiting you. So those were the ones from the trailer, and you will be challenging Artemis. You also need to get the expansion to get the following updates. We have the new story. In short, First Light has fallen, and we need to fight the Angry Earth that have taken over. But with that also come mounts. Summon a mount for faster traversal across Eternum. Master horses, dire wolves, and lions, each with a unique look, customizable equipment, and a name you can set. Level up the new riding trade skill to earn upgrades like increased speeds. Obviously, there's probably going to be some food that increases your speed further or something like that, but it's going to be interesting how you can customize your mount and to what extent. Also, it's going to be interesting to see what factor these will be in PvP. Now, we know that if you got attacked recently, you can't just mount up. But, for example, in Wars or in Outpost Rush, can you travel from one point to another faster with your mount? Is that something you can do? Because that would fundamentally change many of the current PvP mechanics. A massive change is the new progression. Your new max level is now 65 and the new maximum gear score is now confirmed 700. And you get new attributes to help power up your builds. Your trade skills are also you can complete a new faction quest and unlock a new faction tier loaded with, I quote, desirable gear and items. At this point we also have to say that they're not really giving us all the information about the expansion in this article yet. They're giving us a surface look, but we don't know what the implications of all these changes will be exactly. There could be a lot more behind this than we can tell so far. For example, when it comes to the level increase and the gear score increase, how will that affect previously existing zones? What will that mean in terms of new materials, and will the new materials only be gained from the new zone, or can they be gained in previously existing zones? All the kind of stuff that we just can't tell yet. We'll have to wait and see what they can tell us. The progression goes even further. There's a new gear rarity, artifacts. Find and equip artifacts, a powerful new tier of weapons and armor. Complete a series of quests and awaken the artifact's full potential by unlocking its 6 perks, including 1 unique playstyle defining perk to change your game. This sounds absolutely crazy. I don't know how this will work at all. This sounds like this is going to be massively impacting your character, and I also don't know if that means you can have multiple of these, if you can just have a full set like you can have with Legendary and just have a ton of very unique, impactful perks. In that case, I feel like crafting would be kind of redundant, but maybe there's something more to it, or maybe some of them can be crafted somehow, maybe that's somehow tied to the expeditions. We'll have to find out. Again, we're not getting the full picture here at all, we're just getting the first hints. We also have the new weapon, the Flail. The Flail is a versatile one-handed weapon with the option for an offhand shield. Interesting enough, they say option here. Technically that's true for the longsword as well, but you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you use it without a shield. With this picture here and with the trailer, we've now twice seen the Flail being used without a shield, so maybe you can actually do that. Maybe the benefit of not using a shield is something different from using a shield here, which would make this very unique with a lot more playstyle options. Use arcane magic, so arcane damage, first weapon with that as well, to enhance attacks and buff allies or debuff enemies for an easier victory. So it sounds like it's not really focused on healing or anything like that, but more buffing and debuffing, utility focus, maybe more in the direction of the Void Gauntlet, though obviously somewhat different because this is a arcane weapon, a melee weapon that seems to be primarily focused on physical damage of some kind, I'm assuming. So yeah, we'll find out. They specifically mention here, through a combination of melee, arcane magic and strong defenses, the wielder can bolster their group's effectiveness without dropping the offense. And we know that the weapon will be scaling with strength and focus according to data mining. So yeah, going to be a very interesting approach here in terms of what this will be used for. I really hope that my Paladin dream can still come true with this, but it seems very cool so far. We have another quick mention of the Elysian Wilds here as a new zone. We kinda know that at this point. But in this new zone is also a new expedition, the Savage Divide. Embark on a dangerous new level 62 plus expedition to track down the primordial beast lords before chaos emerges from the depth of Eternum. So we'll at least be fighting the Mammoth here and very likely the Minotaur as well. Then maybe also the Wolf? Maybe also Artemis? I don't know. There's also a new Heartrune, which is Primal Fury. We don't know much about that yet. They only say, unleash your inner beast to deal unarmed light and heavy attacks on enemies. I absolutely love that though. I always thought that New World could benefit from more unarmed combat, and that would be cool if you had a full class that was just unarmed combat, but I'll take this. I'll take an unarmed Heartrune where I can just punch down on my opponent. I love that idea. So those things were the expansion exclusive ones, but there are also some Season 3 specific ones, even though some of them also affect the expansion exclusive ones, so not quite sure why they have this split like that, but let's get into it. First we have, of course, the new Season Pass, much like previous seasons. You have your Season Journey, activity cards, and challenges. Then we have the new Influence races. Capture new Influence towers and strike down enemy factions in open world combat for territorial supremacy. Each faction will compete for influence in specific zones during scheduled times. If an attacking faction earns enough influence through PvP missions, influence towers, and forts before the race ends, they receive bonus rewards, plus the opportunity to declare war. If the defending faction prevents the attacker from scoring enough influence within the time limit, they'll earn bonus rewards for both the influence race and the next war. Regardless of who wins, the attacking faction with the most influence can escalate the conflict into war. So wars are basically guaranteed to happen as long as anyone is running missions, which is great. I love that. I really dislike the system where wars could just be fully prevented through zerging. So even if you zerg hard, you're not gonna prevent the war, but apparently you're gonna get bonus rewards for the next war, which I'm not sure if that means bonus rewards at the end of the next war, or if you actually get rewards that will somehow help you in the war itself. If it's help for the war itself, then I feel like there's a lot of incentive for people to actively defend their territories. Again, we don't really know how this whole thing works yet. We don't know what exactly we need to do at influence towers, what exactly is happening with the forts, and if the PvP missions will remain the same way as they were before. I really hope they don't. I really hope the PvP missions are more interesting and more related to the PvP itself. But it sounds like they're trying to make this a whole PvP aspect of the game, especially with this hot zone effect, effectively, by putting everything into a specific time slot and saying, this is when you're attacking, this is when you're getting attacked, go there at that point. I think that should be a very nice and easy way to find PvP. I personally wouldn't even be opposed to the entire zone being forced PvP for that time frame, just to encourage as much PvP as possible. But the fact that you're getting direct rewards for pushing also gives players who may not even be interested in the war itself more incentive to participate in the influence race. I might be one of those players, for example. I think if the rewards are good enough and they're good PvP rewards, then why not jump in and fight a little bit there and get some cool rewards out of it. The main storyline quest revamp is also continuing with Eden Grove and Great Cleave this time. They're kind of getting closer towards the end. They're planning to finish this by the end of the year. Everything is getting removed. Ward, Bane, Resilience, and Expertise. Few of those we already knew, but now we have a few more. So, for Bane, they're increasing the base damage of magic and ranged weapon in PvE to make them more effective alternatives to melee options against multiple enemies, kind of balancing out the fact that they're losing the bonus Bane that they had on ranged weapons or magic weapons previously. Very understandable. For wards, they're making adjustments on the AI and encounter side to account for the removal of their defensive and offensive benefits. So we'll generally see some tweaks to the health and damage values of many mobs, I'm assuming. For Resilience, they're adding crit reduction to all players via the equip load effects, and that's what they already mentioned previously but didn't give us numbers. Now they did. Light armor will now have a 15% reduction to crits, medium will have 20%, and heavy will have 25%. So wearing heavy is essentially equal to 5 pieces of Resilient, while light is equal to 3 pieces of Resilient, and puts you at a lot more risk because that's kind of a very close cutoff for a lot of perks where things like Vicious will be going right over that and will be hitting you for more damage. So something you definitely have to be careful with now. I want to emphasize here once again that we don't know what other changes are coming along with this. I'm sure these are not the only changes to equip loads that we will be seeing. So I wouldn't just say because of this that light is dead, for example, because there could be other parts that make light a lot more viable. Items that currently have Resilient will have the health perk instead, which increases the player's health as a certain percentage of their base health. They didn't mention what they're going to do with Ward, so it sounds like for Resilient the switch will generally be the health perk, and for Ward it might be something else. For Expertise, they're making adjustments to the gear score drops from all creatures based on their level. This is interesting in itself. With Expertise just being completely gone, you'll just have to kill the highest level mobs to get the best gear, I suppose. But what, for example, happens to chests in that context? Again, something where we would need more details to know how exactly all of that works, because I doubt that we're never going to get any good items from chests again, for example. So they might be connected to the creatures level around them, but that would also make it very easy to get the highest level gear just by sneaking into a high level zone, looting some chests and getting out. So yeah, again, we'll need to see the specifics here. They make a brief mention of the seasonal events that are coming up that will also remain free for all players. Night Whale Hello, the Halloween one, and Turkey Terror. In the next part, the expansion FAQ, they actually tell us more about features that they haven't mentioned anywhere else. Gonna skip some very obvious questions here. One, for example, was, does the rise of the Angry Earth expansion include the premium reward track? The answer here is no. And the expansion content will also not be limited time like the seasonal content. Now, one important question is what the impact of not only the expansion is. New World Rise of the Angry Earth is the only way for players to experience the Elysian Wilds zone, makes sense, the Primal Fury Heartrune, the Savage Divide Expedition, the Flail weapon, artifact gear, mounts, progression updates, and revamped mutations. All other modes, events, and quests will remain accessible for everyone to enjoy together. Now, I am questioning the progression updates part a little bit. I would imagine if they're removing expertise from the higher levels, then I don't think they will keep them in for people who don't buy the expansion. That wouldn't really make much sense. I'm not sure what will happen with Umbral shards in that regard, but especially the revamped mutations are an interesting mention here. Let's talk about that in itself first. To further improve mutations as an endgame activity, they've revamped the experience for level 65 players. As a result, you will need to purchase Rise of the Angry Earth and max out your character to enter mutated expeditions. Based on player feedback, mutations will have 3 difficulties and a weekly limit of 100 mutations, much more reasonable. This added accessibility means less time waiting for groups and more opportunities for players to help less experienced adventurers. Players can also look forward to more desirable endgame rewards. For example, players that complete elite mutations will have a chance to earn artifacts. So that's one place they came from. Here's the difficulty breakdown. Intermediate requires 650 gear, includes mutation. Hard requires 675 gear, includes mutation and promotion. Elite requires 700 gear, includes mutation, promotion, and curses. So, like the old M10. Now, for most serious speedrunners, I think it was obvious that they're gonna go for the expansion because no one's gonna compete on the non-expansion version, so fair enough in that regard. I find this concerning for new players that come into the game and that want to maybe test out mutations before they buy the expansion, that will now apparently not have the option to do so at all, because as far as I can tell from what they're saying here, the old mutation system is going to be removed entirely, which, I mean, good riddance, but it appears that they won't have access to any of the new mutation system unless they buy the expansion. Unlike removing First Light, which I don't think anyone actually cared about much, this does seem like it's cutting out a bit of content. I would argue it wasn't good content, but it's still cutting out content that I think some people would have enjoyed for at least a brief period until they decided to get the expansion. Also, on a side note, New World have updated their recommended specs based on how much has been added to the game, and that's a spicy one. They're going as far as recommending a 3600X and a GeForce 2060, as well as an M2 with 2.5 gigabytes read speed. So, yeah, my PC is very much at the very recommended edge, basically. It's right there, but it's not well above it. The PTR will also be coming back for the expansion. They already mentioned that it will be shorter than usual, but it will be there, so we get to try out some stuff. Most of it here is just them explaining how PTR works, and then there's a list of all the features that we get to test, which is basically just everything that is in this list here anyways. Now, here are my thoughts so far on the expansion as a whole. I know some people were hoping for many different zones and things like that, but I personally don't think that is the most important aspect of an expansion, because you play through them once and you're kind of done with them. I think the more important part is adding a lot of long-term content that people have replayability with. It seems they're trying to do that approach by, for example, the new territory system as well as the mutator system. And hopefully those work out well. If they work out well, then that side will be covered. I am a bit surprised that we're not hearing more on the PvP side of things. I think they are very much seeing this territory thing as the main PvP thing for the expansion. I hope it works out. I hope that is enough. I was hoping for maybe something more about wars, or maybe something about an OPR map or something. Who knows? But maybe we'll see that later this year. I do think that with all the system resets and the level upgrade and everything else, there is significantly more content here than it was in Brimstone Sands, so I think it's fair to label this as an expansion. I do think that the $30 price point, given what is in the expansion here, is on the steeper side. I think from what we've seen so far, it seems more like a $20 expansion, but again, something we'll have to see when it's fully revealed. My biggest concern is the incentive for players to get the expansion. Basically, you're getting left behind in many ways if you don't get the expansion, but there isn't really much pushing you to test out things. There's not much you can try out and have fun with to see if you will like the expansion eventually. So you can't just use the weapons or just the mounts or anything. And I think it would have been nice to have one feature available for everyone, one major feature that they add in the expansion, just so they have more of a reason to go for the expansion. Say, hey, okay, this looks really cool. If the rest of the stuff is like this, then I'm going to go for it and I'm going to actually buy the expansion itself. They're kind of doing the opposite here, where they take it a little bit away from the people that don't get the expansion, which I think is not going to land all too well with the existing player base. Sure, it won't affect those of us like me who are going to get the expansion anyways, but it will affect those who are somewhat hesitant if they should get the expansion. In summary, I'm very hyped for the expansion, but a bit so-so on the whole pricing system and how they plan to implement it. Once we know more, I will of course let you know, and in the next days we'll also talk about the new patch. I wanted to do that today, but I'm gonna have to postpone that a little bit. So if you'd like to see that, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified. If you want to support me further, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to my patrons who already do exactly that and get early trading tips in return. Thanks for watching. Duke Sloth, out.